I always thought the sky was the safest place for me. Up there, above the clouds, where the roar of the engines drowned out every other sound, I felt untouchable. 35 years old, a captain in the United States Air Force, trusted to lead training missions, trusted to carry the weight of other men's lives in my hands. But all it takes is one wrong moment, one engine failure, and everything you thought you were comes crashing down. It happened so fast. 1 second, the instruments were steady. The next, alarms were screaming. My crew was shouting, but all I remember is the vibration tearing through the cockpit, the sense that the plane was no longer under my command. I pulled the ejection handle. The blast threw me into the open air, and for a split second, I thought, this is it. This is how it ends. I woke up in the hospital days later. At first, it felt like a fog. Machines beeped around me, tubes in my arms, pain crawling through every nerve. Doctors said I'd been lucky. Lucky to be alive. Lucky to still breathe, even if my body would never be the same. They told me about the damage to my heart, the risks to my nervous system. I should have been grateful. But what awaited me outside the coma wasn't gratitude, it was betrayal. The first thing I saw wasn't my wife's face. It wasn't Elise holding my hand, whispering how happy she was that I survived. No, what I saw was my phone on the bedside table, buzzing with unread messages. I picked it up with trembling hands. And there it was. A message from Elise, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone else. I deserve this money after everything I've done for you. I didn't understand at first. My mind was still cloudy, my chest still heavy from the trauma. But when I checked our accounts, reality hit me harder than the crash ever could. Zero. Every account, drained. Savings, checking, the emergency fund, everything. Gone. She took it all. While I lay between life and death, Elise decided to start over, without me. And she didn't just walk out. She took the life we had built together, every dollar, every sacrifice, every dream. Lying there in that hospital bed, I realized something far worse than surviving a crash. The woman I trusted most, the woman I thought would stand by me no matter what, had abandoned me when I needed her most. My body was broken, my future uncertain, and the one person I had called my anchor had cut the rope and left me to drown. But here's the thing about a man who survives falling from the sky. He doesn't give up easily. And as much as Elise thought she had finished me, she had no idea who she was really dealing with. Because I was coming back. And this time, I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was fighting for justice. Grant didn't even hesitate when he picked up the phone. My voice was weak, rough, but the moment he heard me say, "I need you," he was already on his way. That's who Grant has always been. My older brother, the kind of man who doesn't ask questions until after he's already standing by your side. When he arrived at the hospital, I saw the look in his eyes. Relief that I was alive, yes, but also worry. He could see it written all over my face. This wasn't just about the crash. Something deeper had broken, something I couldn't patch up with stitches or rehab. I told him everything in a whisper, like if I said it too loud, it would shatter what little strength I had left. Elise, the money, the message. His jaw tightened, and for a second, I thought he was going to storm out and find her right then and there. But instead, he just nodded and said, "We'll deal with it. First, let's get you out of here." I didn't argue. I couldn't bear the thought of going back to that house. Our house. The walls where Elise and I had planned our future, laughed, fought, made love. It all felt poison now. The idea of lying in that bed alone, surrounded by the ghost of her betrayal, was unbearable. So I let Grant take me home. Not to my home, but to his. That night, lying in his guest room, I couldn't sleep. My body ached, every movement a reminder of the crash. But the real pain came from the memories that wouldn't stop flooding in. Elise and I had met so quickly, married even faster. Everyone said we were moving too fast, but I ignored them. I was in love, or maybe just blinded by the idea of what love was supposed to be. I remembered the way she smiled at me during our wedding vows, the way she held my hand when I got deployed, the promises she whispered late at night. "I'll always be here, no matter what." But now those words felt like poison, and the truth was staring me in the face. I hadn't just lost my wife. I'd lost the version of myself that believed in her. The crash had broken my body. Elise had broken my soul. And yet, Somewhere in that darkness, a spark began to burn. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was survival. But I knew one thing. I couldn't let her walk away with everything. Not after what she'd done. I needed strength. I needed clarity. And I needed allies. That's when Miles, my younger cousin, the law student with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue, showed up the next morning. He took one look at me and said, "We're not letting her get away with this. Show me the paperwork." I didn't even know if I had the fight in me. But looking at him, at Grant, at the two people who refused to let me sink, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the crash. Hope. Miles was nothing like Grant and me. Where we were forged in discipline and duty, Miles was sharp, restless, and endlessly curious. He was only in his 20s, still in law school, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone twice his age. And in that moment, staring at my broken body sprawled across Grant's couch, he was exactly what I needed. A fresh pair of eyes that saw through lies. I handed him every document I still had access to: mortgage papers, refinancing agreements, insurance policies. Most of it I hadn't looked at in months. Between deployments and training, I trusted Elise to handle the details. My mistake. Miles flipped through the stack like a poker player studying his hand. His brow furrowed, then arched, and finally he leaned back with a smirk that sent a shiver down my spine. "You realize," he said slowly, "you might have just handed her the rope she's going to hang herself with." I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" He tapped one document with his finger. "The house. You refinanced it last year, didn't you?" "Yeah. Lower interest rate. Elise said it was the smart move." "Exactly. And here's the kicker. You refinanced it under your name only. Elise isn't listed as an owner anymore. Technically, she has no legal claim on the property." For the first time in weeks, I felt my lips twitch into something like a smile. A small one, but real. Miles wasn't finished. He pulled another paper from the stack and held it up. "And this? A power of attorney form you signed before your last deployment. It only takes effect if you're incapacitated. But the thing is," he looked at me sharply, "it requires notarized medical proof. Elise didn't have that, which means every financial move she made while you were in that coma, potentially fraudulent." The words hit me like oxygen rushing into starved lungs. Elise thought she'd stripped me bare, but without realizing it, I'd left myself a shield. Not by design, not out of foresight, just dumb luck and timing. But sometimes, luck is all a man needs. Grant leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "So what you're saying is, she overplayed her hand?" Miles grinned. "Exactly. She thinks she took everything. But she doesn't even realize she left him with the most important cards." I sat back, feeling the weight of my body pressing into the couch. The pain in my chest was still there, constant and cruel. But for the first time since the crash, I didn't feel helpless. I wasn't just a victim lying in a hospital bed, waiting for life to decide my fate. I was a soldier again, and I had a mission. Elise wanted to drain me dry? Fine. But now I had proof that her greed could destroy her. The call came late in the evening, just as I was trying to settle into some kind of routine at Grant's house. My body was still weak, every step a reminder that I wasn't the same man who had once flown fighter jets with ease. But mentally, I was sharpening, thanks to Miles, thanks to Grant. And then the phone rang, and everything inside me twisted. It was an old friend from my neighborhood, a guy who lived just a few streets over from my house. His voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. "Troy, listen, I didn't know if I should even tell you this, but I've been seeing someone hanging around your place. A man, not just once, pretty regular, driving Elise's car, sometimes even staying overnight." At first, I couldn't speak. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles went white. My heart pounded against my ribs, still fragile from the crash, but nothing could stop the surge of rage that boiled through me. Elise hadn't just stolen my money. She'd replaced me before I was even out of the hospital bed. I pressed him for details. He hesitated, but finally admitted. It was Curtis Maddox, my neighbor. The man who used to wave at me when I mowed the lawn, who borrowed tools from my garage, who smiled and called me brother. That snake had been living two lives right under my nose. For a moment, the betrayal was too much. My chest tightened, and I had to sit down before I collapsed. Curtis Maddox, my so-called neighbor. My wife's lover. My replacement. Grant was furious when I told him. I could see the fire in his eyes, the way his fists clenched. But he forced himself to calm down, because he knew I wasn't ready for fights I couldn't win yet. "We're not going after him in the street," he said firmly. "We're going after him in court. We'll bury them both." That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Curtis in my house, touching the walls I painted, walking across the floors I paid for, lying in the bed that once belonged to Elise and me. And the worst part? I couldn't shake the image of her with him, laughing, whispering, betraying. By morning, I made a decision. If Elise thought she could humiliate me, if Curtis thought he could steal the life I'd built, then they were about to learn something very important. I wasn't just some broken man clinging to the scraps of his past. I was Troy Callahan, and I still knew how to fight. So I called the bank. I launched a fraud investigation into the withdrawal of my funds. And when the representative on the other end of the line said the words, "We'll look into unauthorized transactions, Mr. Callahan," I felt a rush of grim satisfaction. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about justice. Victor Hale wasn't the kind of lawyer you hired for a divorce. He wasn't the type to hold your hand and tell you everything would be okay. He was cold, precise, and terrifyingly sharp. The first time I sat across from him in his office, I felt like I was being debriefed after a mission gone wrong. His questions cut deep. His tone left no room for hesitation. "Your wife withdrew funds while you were in a coma?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. His voice was calm, but his eyes, those icy, calculating eyes, made me feel as though he was already dissecting the entire case in his head. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my anger from spilling over. He scribbled a note, then looked at me. "Then this isn't just a divorce. This is exploitation of a vulnerable person. A serious legal offense. If we can prove she acted without proper authority, we're not just talking about recovering assets. We're talking about her facing criminal liability." For the first time since the crash, I felt like I wasn't just reacting, I was planning. This wasn't about Elise winning anymore. This was about me fighting back. But of course, Elise wasn't going to roll over and surrender. A few days later, I got a message from her. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't remorse. It was her twisted version of justification. "Troy, you don't understand. I've sacrificed so much for you. I stood by you while you were gone, while I felt alone. I deserve this. You'll see it my way eventually." I read it over and over, each word slicing deeper. Sacrifices? She called betrayal a sacrifice. She called theft a right. Victor told me not to respond. "Silence is more powerful than any insult," he said. So I ignored her. And maybe that was the first time Elise realized she was losing control of me. Because almost immediately after, she played her next card. She hired Serena Pike. The name alone sent a chill down my spine. Serena wasn't just a lawyer. She was a shark. I'd heard stories about her in the local news, about how she shredded men in courtrooms, leaving them broken, penniless, humiliated. She was notorious for one thing, turning wives into executioners. When Victor heard the name, his expression didn't change. But the way he straightened his posture told me everything. This was going to be war, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. Walking into that courtroom felt more terrifying than strapping into a jet before takeoff. At least in the air, I trusted my skills, trusted my training. Here, my fate rested in the hands of strangers, lawyers, clerks, and one man in a black robe. Judge Franklin Moore. He carried himself with quiet authority, a man who didn't need to raise his voice to command the room. The moment he stepped in, everyone fell silent. I could tell right away he wasn't the type to tolerate games. That gave me hope. Serena Pike, on the other hand, was exactly what I expected. She stood tall, sleek, and radiating the kind of arrogance that comes from destroying people for a living. She barely glanced at me before smirking, like she already saw me lying in pieces on the floor. To her, I wasn't a man. I was prey. Victor Hale was ice in human form. Calm, calculated, completely unfazed. Where Serena prowled, Victor stayed still, and I realized that stillness was its own weapon. He didn't need to roar. He made people lean in to listen. The arguments began. Serena painted me as weak, incapable of managing my own life, a man who couldn't possibly survive without Elise's guidance. She tried to spin my coma into a weapon against me, making it sound like Elise had acted out of compassion, out of necessity. But Victor wasn't having it. He laid out the facts, sharp and merciless. Elise drained the accounts without notarized authority, took advantage of my incapacitation, and left me destitute while I fought for my life. His words cut through her theatrics like a scalpel. Judge Moore listened without expression. Then, after a long pause, he delivered the first blow of justice. Until further review, all joint accounts are to be frozen. Neither party will access or transfer funds until this court makes a final ruling. It was a small victory, but to me, it felt like the first breath after drowning. Elise looked stunned. Serena's jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. But the real breakthrough came later that night, thanks to Miles. He had been digging through records, connecting dots, and when he walked into Grant's living room with a stack of papers, I knew something big was coming. He dropped them on the table and grinned. I found it. I frowned. Found what? He pointed to the statements. A secret account, in Elise's name, with over 120 grand stashed away. Regular deposits, small enough to avoid suspicion, but steady. Guess when they line up? I leaned forward, my heart pounding. Every time you were deployed, every time you were gone, she was moving money behind your back. For years. It hit me like another crash. This wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just greed. This was premeditated. Elise hadn't acted in desperation. She'd been planning my downfall long before my plane ever touched the ground. I thought I had already hit rock bottom. Finding out Elise drained our accounts while I was unconscious. Seeing her lawyer up with Serena Pike, the courtroom shark. Learning about the secret stash of money she'd been hiding for years. All of that was enough to make any man feel like the ground had been ripped out from under him. But Miles wasn't finished. He came into Grant's kitchen with that sharp gleam in his eye, the one that told me he had uncovered something big. He dropped another folder onto the table and slid it across to me like a weapon. My stomach twisted before I even opened it. Inside were bank records, wire transfers, names, dates. At first, they looked like the usual mess of numbers, but then I saw it. The recipient. Again and again, over the course of months. Curtis Maddox. The name hit me like a punch to the chest. I stared at the page, willing myself to be wrong. Maybe it was another Curtis. Maybe this was some coincidence. But no, the address linked to the account matched. It was him. My neighbor. My so-called friend. The man who used to wave at me when I left for deployments, beer in his hand, smile plastered across his face. The man who borrowed my lawn mower and returned it a week late with a chuckle and an apology. The man who once helped me carry a new grill into the backyard, sweating and laughing like we were brothers. All that time, he was sleeping with my wife. And not just that, he was working with her. Hiding money. Building a future that didn't include me. I felt my breath catch in my throat, my chest tightening until it hurt. My heart, already fragile from the crash, pounded so hard I thought it might explode. I gripped the edge of the table just to steady myself. They weren't just having an affair, Miles said quietly, watching my reaction. They were partners. In everything. This was planned. Grant exploded before I could. He slammed his fist down on the table so hard the glasses rattled. That son of a bitch was in our backyard cookouts, Troy. Eating our food, drinking our beer, looking you in the eye while his voice broke off in fury. I barely heard him. My mind had gone somewhere else, spiraling through memories I didn't want to revisit. The time Curtis offered to keep an eye on Elise while I was away. The way he lingered a little too long when he hugged her at our block party. The subtle smirk I once caught on his face when Elise handed him a plate of food. At the time, I brushed it off. Paranoia, I told myself. Elise was my wife. Curtis was my neighbor. Simple. Safe. Now, every one of those moments replayed like a cruel movie, mocking me for not seeing the truth. Victor Hale's voice on the phone was steady when I told him. Cold, efficient. This changes everything, he said. Now we're not just dealing with marital betrayal. We're talking conspiracy, collusion, a calculated effort to strip you of your assets. The court will view this very differently. But his calm words didn't cool my blood. They didn't erase the images flashing through my mind. Elise in my bed, Curtis in my kitchen, the two of them laughing at how blind I had been. Grant tried to put a hand on my shoulder to ground me. Listen, Troy. You survived that crash because you don't quit. Don't let them finish what the sky couldn't. I nodded, but the truth was I was shaking. My body from the injuries, my soul from the betrayal. Rage is a strange thing. It burns hot, but it also hollows you out. And as I sat there, staring at Curtis's name on those bank transfers, I realized I wasn't just angry. I was humiliated. The kind of humiliation that scars deeper than any wound. When I heard Curtis Maddox had put his house on the market, my gut told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't just selling. He was running. The timing lined up too perfectly. Judge Moore freezing the accounts, Miles uncovering the hidden stash, Victor circling them like a predator. Curtis could feel the walls closing in, and now he was trying to cash out before the truth buried him. I wanted to storm across the street and drag him out of that house with my own hands. The rage inside me burned like jet fuel, begging to ignite. But I knew better. My body was still fragile, my heart a ticking clock, and fists weren't going to win this war. Evidence would. Strategy would. Victor had already filed a motion to freeze Curtis's assets. If he thinks he's going to liquidate and disappear, Victor said with his usual icy calm, he's in for a rude awakening. But fate has a strange way of handing you weapons when you least expect them. It happened outside the courthouse. I was there for a procedural hearing, a small step in the endless grind of legal battles. Elise was there too, with Serena at her side. And, of course, Curtis. The three of them together looked like a twisted family portrait, my wife, my neighbor, and the shark they'd hired to tear me apart. I kept my distance, staying in the shadow of the steps, when suddenly their alliance cracked in front of me. Elise and Curtis were arguing, their voices rising, sharp and ugly. You promised me we'd be safe. Elise hissed, jabbing a finger into his chest. And you promised me you'd keep your mouth shut. Curtis snapped back, his face red with fury. You're the one who screwed this up. People were starting to stare. Serena tried to step between them, hissing something I couldn't hear, but it was too late. My phone was already in my hand. My thumb hit record. I captured everything. Their shouting, Elise's frantic voice, Curtis's curses. They were unraveling in broad daylight, and I had the proof. Not rumors, not suspicions. Cold, undeniable video evidence of their conspiracy. Later, when I showed the clip to Victor, his lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. This, he said, tapping the screen, is the nail in their coffin. For the first time, I felt the tide turning. Elise wasn't untouchable anymore. Curtis wasn't the smug neighbor who thought he'd replaced me. They were cornered animals, snapping at each other, exposed for the world to see. Still, that night, as I lay awake in Grant's guest room, I couldn't stop thinking about Elise's words. I deserve this. She had convinced herself she was the victim, that all of this, the lies, the theft, the betrayal, was justified. And that terrified me more than anything. Because a woman who truly believes she's the victim, she'll burn everything down before she admits the truth. The day of the hearing felt different. I woke up with a weight in my chest, not just from my injuries, but from the gravity of what was about to happen. This wasn't another procedural formality. This was war in open court. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs when we walked in. Victor was calm as ever, briefcase in hand, his eyes like ice. Grant was at my side, a solid presence, while Miles sat behind us, flipping through notes like he'd been preparing for this moment his entire life. Across the aisle, Elise sat stiff, her hair perfectly styled, her lips pressed into a tight line. She didn't look at me. She couldn't. Curtis, on the other hand, smirked like he always did, as if this was just a game and he'd already won. And next to them, Serena Pike radiated confidence, whispering in Elise's ear like a serpent promising victory. Judge Moore entered, and silence fell. He was steady, unreadable, the kind of man who weighed every word like it carried the fate of the world. Victor presented first. He laid out the financial trail, Elise's secret account, the withdrawals during my coma, the wire transfers to Curtis. Every detail, every piece of evidence, delivered like a series of precision strikes. I watched Serena's smile falter with each blow. Then Victor played the video. The sound of Elise and Curtis shouting echoed through the courtroom. Elise's shrill accusations, Curtis's angry denials. It was all there, undeniable. You could feel the air change as the room absorbed the reality of what they were. Not grieving lovers trying to survive. Not a wife acting out of necessity. Criminals. Liars. Parasites. For the first time, Elise's composure cracked. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. Curtis cursed under his breath, glaring at her as though she'd betrayed him. Their alliance was crumbling in front of everyone. Judge Moore leaned forward, his voice steady but sharp. This court sees clear evidence of deception, collusion, and willful exploitation of a vulnerable party. Effective immediately, all assets belonging to Elise Callahan and Curtis Maddox are frozen. Mr. Callahan is granted temporary possession of the family home until further resolution. The gavel struck, and the sound rang out like thunder. For a moment, I couldn't move. Relief, anger, vindication, all of it crashed over me like a tidal wave. Elise's face drained of color. Curtis muttered something vile under his breath, but it didn't matter. They were cornered now, their power stripped away. And yet, when I looked at Elise, I didn't just see fear. I saw something darker. Desperation. The kind that makes a person dangerous. Because losing everything doesn't always break people. Sometimes, it makes them reckless. The divorce dragged on for months, each hearing another battlefield. But the tide had already turned. Elise and Curtis could claw, scream, and fight, but the evidence was ironclad. Every lie they spun unraveled under Victor's steady hand. Every accusation they threw at me dissolved in the face of the truth. Judge Moore wasn't swayed by Elise's theatrics or Serena Pike's vicious attacks. He saw Elise for what she was, a woman who had exploited her husband's weakest moment for selfish gain. And Curtis? He didn't even bother showing up after a while. The man who once strutted around like he owned the world had vanished the moment things got difficult. In the end, justice was clear. The house was mine. The majority of the assets were restored to me. Elise walked away with almost nothing, stripped of the life she tried to steal. Curtis disappeared from the neighborhood, his house empty, a for sale sign rotting on the lawn like a scar of his betrayal. I thought I would feel triumphant, that I'd celebrate the victory like winning a war. But the truth? It felt quieter than that. Not relief, not even joy, just the kind of peace I hadn't known in years. I stayed in the house for a while, repairing the silence, rebuilding the walls that had once felt poisoned. Some nights, the memories still haunted me. The sound of Elise's laughter, the way Curtis shook my hand like a brother. But each day, the ghost grew weaker. I couldn't fly anymore. The doctors made that clear. My body would never again handle the pressure, the speed, the brutal demands of combat in the sky. At first, that truth gutted me more than anything Elise had done. Flying wasn't just my career, it was who I was. But life has a way of forcing you to adapt. So I became an instructor. I taught young cadets the skills, the discipline, the courage it takes to command the sky. Watching them take off, hearing the roar of jets overhead, I felt a different kind of pride. A quieter one, a lasting one. And I wasn't alone. Grant stayed by my side through it all, solid as a rock. Miles graduated law school, and I helped him pay his way because he had helped save me when I couldn't save myself. My family, my real family, stood with me in the wreckage, and together, we built something stronger. As for Elise, sometimes, late at night, I still hear her words in my head. I deserve this. But she was wrong. She didn't deserve anything she stole. And the truth is, the crash didn't ruin my life. She did. Yet in a twisted way, her betrayal freed me. Because when you survive a fall from the sky, when you survive betrayal that cuts deeper than steel, you realize something powerful. I wasn't destroyed. I was reborn. And this time, no one would ever take my life from me again.